Cyberpunk 2077 has a pretty big unsolved mystery. But to be honest, I think a fair few of you know that already. The FF06B5 mystery has gotten a fair amount of media coverage at this point. I mean, even me personally, I've made several videos on this. This is a pretty big mystery that's remained unsolved in the Cyberpunk community since the game's release, and even some of the devs have commented on it numerous times at this point. This mystery also may or may not be connected to the also unsolved ARG that has been going on in Cyberpunk for literally years. But as you know, since you clicked on this video, we just got an update on all of this in what I would call one of the most bizarre ways possible. And that's because Cyberpunk 2077's biggest mystery just got a new clue or update in The Witcher 3 Next Gen. Because yes, the FF06B5 mystery has now also been added to The Witcher 3. And this all has added a whole additional level of depth to the mystery, involving vampires, cut Cyberpunk content, and maybe even what skills you take in Cyberpunk 2077. If you've somehow never heard of FF06B5, it is honestly pretty simple. As you're driving around Night City, you'll sometimes notice these statues. Some of these are going to be large, hulking structures, while some others are actually relatively small and can even appear on a shelf. There's going to be 8 of these statues in total, but some have the defining characteristic of FF06B5 being written on them, as well as the overall design of these statues is pretty similar. Technically, there are some differences, but largely you're going to have them in this pose with the circuitry design on their chest. And of course, the most notable aspect, some read FF06B5 on them and some don't. Now, diving a bit deeper into all of this, FF06B5 as a color code is known as Shocking Pink, and it's going to look like this. And if you play enough Cyberpunk, this color probably looks pretty familiar to you, as Shocking Pink very closely resembles the color of this orb that these other statues in the game are found to be holding. These statues can also be found all over Night City in various sizes, but there's one notable one that Misty can be found worshipping from time to time. And sometimes outside of this main FF06B5 statue, you can actually find some monks worshipping it. And these monks are fairly indescript outside of one notable ring they all appear to be wearing. This ring is actually worn by a variety of mysterious characters in the game, most notably with Jefferson Peralez and Mr. Blue Eyes. Okay, so all of that was a painfully brief rundown over what we have in Cyberpunk 2077 right now. A brief overview of the FF06B5 mystery in that game. But as we switch over to The Witcher 3 Next Gen, you'll find some pretty crazy similarities. So the new mystery in The Witcher 3 is going to be located in Velen, and specifically you'll find this at the destroyed Bastion. At this location, you're going to find, well, a destroyed Bastion, but also 3 other smaller destroyed structures that are going to be scattered around that central location. And in those structures, what you're going to find are some newly added switches. These were just added to the game with the Next Gen update. They were not here before. And as you could probably guess, what you're going to want to do is run around and flip each of these switches. Your character will even make a nice comment as you do the first one.
Might want to look around some.
After flipping all 3 switches, a rock golem will spawn in the center of the 3 of them. This is a pretty normal fight, you just have to defeat the rock golem, but immediately after doing so, you'll find a new archway/portal actually appears on one of the ledges nearby. As you approach this archway, the portal itself will actually light up and you'll be able to go through it to a very distant location of right on top of the destroyed Bastion. Yeah, it's actually a relatively anticlimactic teleportation, but you can actually descend through the floors of this Bastion now, past a bunch of these shocking pink colored spiderwebs that pop up and occasionally change color for me. There's not really anything of note in the Bastion itself until you get to the final floor, the basement or underground area of it. As here we're going to find our 2 rooms full of invulnerable wraiths. This is pretty interesting. It seems like CDPR deliberately made this a challenging area. No amount of attacking or magic can take down these enemies, although you can get them to 1 HP. So unless you're using console commands, your time here will likely be relatively brief because you're going to be constantly getting attacked. The first room you'll find is pretty basic, but the second room is where things get much more interesting. It's a much larger room overall. You'll find these crystals on these pillars that do look interesting, some piles of dirt scattered around. Oh, and an engraving on the wall that seems to be a very similar color to Shocking Pink and is definitely that same exact circuitry symbol from Cyberpunk 2077. And it seems like this is just a direct connection to Cyberpunk. The color of Shocking Pink and really that circuitry in particular is just unmistakable. These are things that don't typically appear like this in The Witcher 3 otherwise, and it seems like they were directly added as a clue or some kind of relation to FF06B5. But what you'll also notice is this new symbol has a lot of additional details on it. There are a bunch of symbols all over, and if you translate these using the Witcher alphabet, the top line will read FFVQBZ, as well as there are a bunch of other letters below this. And one of the interesting parts about this is, obviously it doesn't exactly read FF06B5, but using this translation, all of the letters do translate directly. The FF, of course, is still FF, and the B is still there. But it's the numbers that are now turned into different letters, and honestly, it's not really clear why. 0 definitely doesn't correspond to the letter V, at least in not an obvious way, so this could be some kind of additional clue or hint to something. Beyond this, you can see the snake eating itself on the outline, as well as there's some orbs with additional letters. The snake eating itself is a symbol of the Ouroboros, which represents a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And also in the background of the center circuitry image, we can see some flames that could be related to the eternal flame, which is going to be a cult in The Witcher 3. And although you could spend a nice long time looking at this symbol in photo mode, technically you still are trapped in the basement of the destroyed bastion. Thankfully, there is a way out. What you're going to have to do is simply use the Ard sign on those 2 crystals that we found on those pillars earlier. After doing this, a portal will open in the center, and your character will even give you a clue that there's something to do, mentioning they need a Yennefer portal. Going back through this portal, it's just going to take you back outside to the bastion, and from here you could honestly just go back to playing The Witcher 3 relatively normally. The only other notable thing is this guy on the ground. This is actually another new addition with the next-gen update. To me, it almost looks like he may have fallen right from around the same place we just were teleported to on the bastion, like he was on that upper ledge, then fell down, although who could really tell? He just is kind of placed in an interesting way near the bastion. But you'll also notice he's barely wearing any clothes, but one thing he is wearing is a ring. Unfortunately, he is facing downward, so you can't actually see what the other side of this ring is. We just get the rear of it. But you do have to wonder if this is not a connection to those rings we see the monks as well as many other characters wearing in Cyberpunk 2077. Definitely feels like that is too much to just be a coincidence. And as you dig a bit deeper, there may be further meaning to all of this within The Witcher 3 itself that could be a pretty big clue, as this overall symbol without all of the letters and shocking pink and the circuitry actually appears in The Witcher 3 by default. You could find this in the base game before the next-gen update, and where it shows up is pretty interesting, as it's going to be closely associated with the vampire quest in The Witcher 3. Regis, who is a higher vampire, has the symbol on his glove. It can be seen here pretty prominently, but even more notably, it can be found in a cave holding the gate that connects the human world to the vampire world. This gate in the cave overall is going to be protected by the Unseen Elder. There's a whole quest line associated with all of this, and the symbol is in the same room as the portal to the vampire world, or at least the gate that connects these 2 worlds. And now perhaps this is the clue. Perhaps the vampire portal, and really just vampires in general, may be related to what we have in Cyberpunk 2077. In Cyberpunk, there's a radio station known as Morrow Rock. It's going to be hosted by Maximum Mike. Maximum Mike is a very notable character in Cyberpunk because it's voiced by the real-life creator of the world, that being Mike Pondsmith. And if you listen to this radio station in Cyberpunk 2077, Maximum Mike will dive into all kinds of conspiracy theories, and one really stands out here, that being about how the corporal elite in Night City may in fact be vampires. That's why they can live so long.
How does the Arasaka family live so long? What about the Lucases, or half a dozen other high-profile corporal families that are pushing 200 years at this point? His answer? They're vampires. The world is ruled by vampires.
So of course, this is literally a conspiracy theory, not only in like our real life analysis of these 2 games, but even in the Cyberpunk 2077 world and lore, this is a conspiracy being shared on the radio. But there are also some other pretty interesting similarities between what we have in The Witcher and Cyberpunk, like the cut cave systems that were supposed to be in Night City. Deconstructing the game is a great source of Cyberpunk content overall, and he has a full video looking at the cut cave systems in Night City. And basically, if you go out into the Badland regions of Night City, you'll notice there are several cave areas that are cut off. You're not able to properly gain access to these, but it seems like it may have been a larger feature, and it may even seem like some of these were meant to connect in an underground portion. And one of the other interesting things to note is many of these cave entrances are Wraith camps. The Wraiths are a gang in Night City, but this has the pretty interesting parallel to The Witcher 3, where you do find Wraiths seemingly guarding that symbol in the basement of the destroyed bastion. So now, could this entire FF06B5 mystery be around vampirism in Night City? Unfortunately, at least as of right now, the real answer is we don't really know. There is definitely something going on here, but the reality is it's not solved yet. We don't know the answers to this question. Vampirism is definitely a concept in cyberpunk lore. There's even vampiric cybernetic implants that you could get yet in the lore. They're not currently added in Cyberpunk 2077, but it's a thing. But there's also just a ton of unknowns with the situation overall. What do all the additional symbols or letters in the Witcher 3 version represent? They're just randomly added to this, and it feels like it's not just nothing. It feels like these aren't random, but have a deeper meaning that hasn't been uncovered just yet. And even further, you could find the flame background on the circuitry image. Is that relevant, or is it nothing? Or even on a higher level, is there some other kind of activation that needs to be done in The Witcher 3? If you look at where this symbol is placed, it almost looks like it's on a boarded up doorway, something covered up by a bunch of stones that were stacked. Is there a way to open this door and go through it? And of course, if you really want to go to a broader level, is this even the same secret? Is this new addition in The Witcher 3 Next Gen just a hint for the bigger mystery in Cyberpunk 2077? Or is there more to do in The Witcher 3? A deeper mystery that needs to be solved in that game also. And if you found all of this interesting, trust me, this is just the beginning of this rabbit hole. Even outside of the FF06B5 mystery, Cyberpunk 2077 also has a massive unsolved ARG that may or may not be related to this in-game secret. And even further, there's always new theories being posited on the FF06B5 subreddit. Is the new symbol in The Witcher 3 a clue for an activation in Cyberpunk 2077, something we need to do in that game? When playing Cyberpunk, you connect to a network that is listed in the bottom left corner. Some people have been speculating that this network could be related. It actually has a similar sequence to the letters and numbers of FF06B5, as well as there's just a whole mountain of quotes from the Cyberpunk devs that lead us in one direction or another. I'll have some links down below right under the like button if you want to get some of these additional resources and really jump into the rabbit hole. But if you are jumping in, you probably want some mods first, so you should check out this video on my top 10 mods of Cyberpunk 2077 for 2022. But otherwise, hopefully you guys found this one informative. Let me know your theories in the comments down below. But with that, I hope to see you all next time.